Now let's look at another equation, which is called the quadratic equation. The quadratic equation is given by this form that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So here is a is not equal to 0. So this is a, b, c are constants. So when we solve for x for this quadratic equation, we have several methods. Let's look at the first method, which is called the factoring method. So in this method, we need to factorize the left side of this quadratic equation. Okay, so now let's look at some examples. This is the 4x squared plus 7x minus 2 equals 0. So we want to factorize the left side. So we notice that the left side can be written as the product of two terms, which is 4x minus 1 times x plus 2, right, equals 0. So we can check it using this way. So we notice that this negative x times x equals what? Negative x, right? And this part, 4x times positive 2 equals 8x. So if you add it together, it becomes plus 7x. So that is correct. Okay, so now if we have the two terms a times b equals 0, what we will have? It implies that a equals 0 or b equals 0, right? So this one gives you the idea for solving this kind of equation. So you have 4x minus 1 equals 0, or 2 plus x plus 2 equals 0. So for the first one, it will give you, this is a linear equation, right? We solve it, so we add 1 on both sides, so it becomes 4x equals 1. So x equals, we divide by 4, 1/4. And for this one, we minus 2 on both sides, so it x equals negative 2. So you have two solutions. And the next method, which is called the quadratic formula. We use the quadratic formula for any quadratic equations, but sometimes it's easy, sometimes you need to do more calculations, right, than the factoring method. This is the quadratic formula. So for the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So here a is not equal to 0, otherwise this is not a quadratic equation, right? It becomes a linear equation. Then what we have? Then we have x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac. Then the whole thing divided by 2a. Okay, so here is a plus minus, that means you have two roots. So if we let the expression under the square root, we let d be the expression under the square root, which is b squared minus a 4ac, which this is d is called the discriminant. Okay, so we have different cases, right? If d equals 0, then we only have this term become 0, so it's plus minus, doesn't matter. So we only have one solution, right? Then the equation only have one solution. This equation only has one solution, which is x equals negative b over 2a, right? If d is greater than 0, then we have two real solutions. Okay, and this 2 is given by this formula. If d is less than 0, so we know that the expression under the square root cannot be less than 0, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense in our real number system. However, in the future, you will learn that if this d is less than 0, then we must have two complex solutions. Okay, so now let's look at one example. This is the example 2x times x minus 1 equals 5. For this kind of example, right, the first thing is you need to convert this one to be our standard form, which is this form. Okay, so in other words, we need to expand and put every term on the left side. So let's expand it. This is 2x squared minus 2x equals 5, right? Then we subtract 5. It's 2x squared minus 2x minus 5 equals 0. So for this one, it's not easy to factorize it, right? But we can use the quadratic formula. So here our a equals 2, right? This is our a equals 2. B equals what? Negative 2. And C equals negative 5. Okay? So this is the ax squared plus b, as this is our standard form. So now we want to use the quadratic formula. So it says x equals negative b, which is negative or negative 2, right? Negative b plus or minus square root b squared, which is negative 2 squared, minus 4ac, 4 times a is 2, times c is negative 5. Then divided by 2 times a is 2. So this is your solution, but you need to simplify it. So this one, x equals what? This is the 2 plus minus. If you calculate the inside, it would give you 44 divided by 4. Okay. So the first thing is you cannot just simplify directly. This is wrong, right? This is wrong because if you want to simplify, you need to simplify each term. Okay, so we notice that this is 44 equals 4 times 11, right? 44 equals 4 times 11. So if we take the square root, it becomes what? This is square root 4 times square root 11. So this is actually 2 times square root 11. Now this would be 2 plus or minus 2 times square root 11 divided by 4. Now you can simplify it. You divide by 2 on the top and bottom. So this one becomes 2. Here's 1. Here's 1. So what you have left? You have 1 plus or minus square root 11 over 2. So that is your solution. So you have two solutions. And there is a very special equations which is called quadratic equation, which is called the square root properties. And many students will make the mistakes on this property. So this is called x squared minus c equals 0. So there is no x linear term for x. So we only have x squared minus c equals 0. So here c is greater than 0, we assume. So if you solve it, you have x squared equals c, right? And then what is the x? We take the square root. Then many students will write this one would be your solution. But keep in mind, actually, we have two solutions. One is positive, the other one is negative, because if you square it, this negative would be a positive. Okay, so if you have this kind of problem, so let's look at we want to use the square root property to solve the problem. If you have 3x minus 2 squared equals 16, for this one, you don't need to expand and simplify. Of course, you can do that. But if we can use the square root property, it would be much easier. So you have, if you take the square root on both sides, so this is 3x minus 2 equals what? Equals the plus or minus square root of 16. Right? So you have, what's this? This is 3x minus 2 equals plus or minus 4. So you have two equations, right? One is 3x minus 2 equals 4. The other one is 3x minus 2 equals negative 4. Now we solve each linear equation separately. So we add 2 on both sides, so it would be 3x equals 6, and x divided by 3x equals 2. We add 2 on both sides, so it becomes 3x equals negative 2. Then divided by 3, so you have negative 2 over 3. So you have two solutions. Then sometimes we have some quadratic type equation. So in other words, we can use the quadratic, the idea of the quadratic equation to solve other higher order terms. Okay, higher order equations. Like this one, this is the quadratic type equation. So for this kind of equation, these equations are not quadratic. However, you can make it to be quadratic form. Okay. So let's look at some examples to help you to understand why we are interested in that. You have 7x to the fourth minus 6x squared minus 1 equals 0. So some students may complain, okay, this is not a quadratic function equation. So what we should do? However, if you do some observations, you can see that this is x to the fourth can be written as x squared and squared, right? minus 6x squared minus 1 equals 0. So if we use a letter u to replace this x squared, so we let u to be x squared, what do we have? We have 7u squared minus 6u minus 1 equals 0, right? So you can say this is a quadratic equation. This is the quadratic equation. Okay, since this is quadratic equations, you can use the different method. You can use the quadratic formula to find the u, and you can also use the factorization to find the u, solution u. Okay, so here we want to use the factorization because the quadratic formula, you just plug in the numbers. It's very easy. However, I want you to be familiar with the factorization. So you can factorize it as 7u plus 1 times u minus 1 equals 0. So you can check this is the plus 1 u, this is u, right? 7u minus 1, it becomes what? Negative 7u. So if you add it together, u plus negative 7u, it becomes negative 6u. So this is correct. So what do you have? You have 7u plus 1 equals 0, or u minus 1 equals 0. For the first equation, you have u equals negative 1. We subtract 1, then divide by 7. And u equals 1, right? Okay, however, you notice that this one, u is equal to x squared. We know everything squared would be a non-negative. So this one u must be a non-negative number, which is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, however, when you have u equals negative 1/7, so that means this is not the answer. The answer is u equals 1. Okay, keep in mind our solution is for x, not for u. So this is not the end of the problem. So we need to plug in back u equals x squared. So which means you have x squared equals 1, right? X squared equals, so this implies x squared equals 1. So we use the square property. X equals what? Take the square root, then you add plus or minus. So it's plus or minus 1. So you have two solutions.